A very interesting story that is panning out is in terms of SUV. The sale of SUV, we know, is already at an all-time high. The share that SUV commands in the auto sector is at an all-time high. But what's also interesting is to understand how the ancillary sector is performing. So from your sunroof to your tires, the tires are getting bigger and the sunroofs are also getting bigger and more in demand, as a result of which these sectors are also doing extremely well.
Totally. So I think, Shweta, one trend which is emerging, and we've talked enough about this, but let's talk a little more. I think a clear trend which is emerging is that automobiles, four-wheelers, cars, are not being perceived in India as a mode of transportation only. I think
It's a status symbol.
Yes, I think the Indian consumer has evolved to a stage where what you drive is a reflection of what you aspire for, what your personality is, and who you want the world to perceive you as. And as a result of which, SUVs have become the flavor of the automobile sector for as long as about 2 years, 2.5 years now. With the auto sector in any case exploding in the post-COVID pent-up demand arena, the lack of public transportation being a preferred mode of transportation, I think more and more Indians are right now vying to get their hands on a set of keys which can give them access to their four-wheeler and drive at will, drive at pleasure. So overall, in this whole game, what has emerged is, and let's talk numbers, 2 million cars have been sold in the first 6 months of this calendar year. Between Jan to June this year, 2 million, 20 lakh new cars,
a quarter.
New cars have been sold. Yeah, so about 1 million cars a quarter.
Lovely.
And I'm only talking about new cars here. You have the data for second-hand cars also. But if you just look at the new cars to begin with, that's about 2 million vehicles, out of which 60% of the market, some estimates suggest 55%, some say 62%, but I'm saying on an average, if it's 60% happen to be SUVs and MUVs. This means, or MPVs as they're called, this means about 6 out of 10 or 1.2 million out of 2 million vehicles sold in India in the last 6 months happen to be these beautiful big vehicles. Now these vehicles, of course, with them also have obvious requirements of ground clearance, which mean bigger wheels. They are heavier, wider vehicles, so they require a wider wheelbase. So overall, the rims that go into automobiles and the size of the tires that get fitted become obviously much bigger. So the tire industry is selling more rubber. The steel industry is selling more alloy. And overall, this little aspiration of Indian drivers is not just giving a fillip to automakers, but the entire ancillary industry that you spoke about, which means bigger tires getting sold, which means more alloy being sold, which is obviously better for the suppliers of these components. So the ancillary industry gets a very, very indirect but beautiful fillip thanks to more Indians buying SUVs. And now you spoke about sunroofs. 1 out of every 4 cars sold in India has been a version with a sunroof. And sunroof cars, like SUVs, are not cheap to buy. So the delta between, let's say, the top model which has a sunroof and the next model below it which does not have a sunroof is at least a lakh and a half rupees. So more and more Indians who are taking even an auto loan which is running in the high interest rate cycle right now don't mind topping up that loan by a lakh or so to get a sunroof. So we are not talking about utility.
I personally never understand the utility of a sunroof. We come to think of it.
Yeah, so I made the the decision, rightly or wrongly, to buy a car last year with a sunroof. But I've got a daughter who once in a while on an empty road, low speed, wants to pop her head out. But how often has that happened? I think it hasn't happened more than half a dozen times in the last 1 year. So the point being, India is not a country.
So was it worth it?
So there's, money can't buy you everything. There are some things that money can't buy. Not that I use the MasterCard to pay for the car, but there are some things money can't buy and you just go for them because you feel that, hey, you're spending so much money, another lakh, okay, let's do it for the joy, let's do it for the pleasure. And that was my reasoning, but I think there are enough people who do like to use the sunroof. But I think India as a whole, Delhi NCR specifically, does not give you an environment or a climate conducive for sunroofs
Exactly,
anyway.
I was coming to that. You have plenty of rainfall, you have plenty of sunshine. The last thing you need is to witness all of that.
And when it's cold,
and
it
it's
freezes
too cold.
you over. Right?
Absolutely.
So you don't get more than maybe 10 days in a
10
year.
to 15 days.
10, 15, and then there's pollution, right? So you don't get more than 10, 15 days in a year, at least in North India, in Delhi, NCR, and around, for you to be able to use your sunroof. But I think people don't mind right now paying that additional delta to get the sunroof to exploit those 10, 15 days in a year where they can pop their heads out.
Absolutely.
So that again has the reinforced glass industry getting better orders from the automobile sector. And I like the way Times of India had written it. So, the sunroof is enabling Indians to break the glass ceiling, and the glass ceiling is technically a glass ceiling, and there's also a class associated with it.
Absolutely.
So glass and class both being reflected in the arrival of sunroofs as a revolution in 25% of cars sold in India.
And that typically has been the Indian way of doing things, which essentially is that you aspire for more and more Indians, as you can rightly see, are opting for a glass ceiling, or rather trying to break the glass ceiling by having a glass panel at the top of their vehicles. Sunroof is becoming more and more common. We are given to understand every 1 out of 4 vehicles today has a sunroof that people are hoping to buy on or latch on to.